for an organization called Ambassador Programs. They're one of our alumni right here. And I gave talks around the U.S. for about 30 years. And my job was to convince parents to part with $6,000 and send their children overseas for 3 weeks. So it was quite a big challenge, and we did a lot of work year to year to refine our programs. I did a lot of training for people to give presentations, and especially to how to be genuine. Here's one of my favorite folks, Margie. I'm glad to have you here, Margie. She's actually works with me in a Toastmasters club, which is an excellent way to kind of keep practicing. Okay, so I'd like to quickly go around the room. I'd like to hear what your name is and what your job is real quick, and the organization too, so I can kind of shift my talk a little bit to fix some things. Okay.
My name is Katrina Finley. I'm a personal banker with Giza Credit Union.
Cool. Okay.
My name is Deborah Ratzlaff, and I am also a personal loan officer with Giza Credit Union.
Okay.
I'm Kendra Wiest, and I'm starting a business called Craft Solutions. It's a business management concern.
Excellent. For business management, you're going to be working with other businesses. Okay. Yes.
My name is Katie Kapka. I do inbound marketing at eTels.
My name is Calvin Elam. I work in the SEO department at eTels.
My name is Ben Doggett. I work in search marketing details.
Okay, excellent.
My name is DJ Schultz. I'm thinking of starting a business in the eye care industry.
Okay, good.
I'm Nelson Perez, and I own a janitorial company.
Excellent. So you want to expand and get more customers and things like that? Yeah. In the back there?
I'm Margie Benchy, and I'm CEO and founder of Golden Sherpa, and I'm starting a business.
Thank you. In the back there?
I'm Brandon Stover. I'm a entrepreneur and coach for other entrepreneurs.
Okay. In the back, oh, sorry, I just couldn't see Kelly in the light there. So this program, I'm going to have a series of probably 4 different programs designed to break down very simply how to present ideas to people, how to give a talk. And I'm not talking about political speeches. I'm talking about speaking to persuade people to do something, which is, I think, everybody's in here to learn that, and to persuade people genuinely. I did sales for many, many years speaking to folks. The one thing I learned the first year I was out is if you're not sincere, no one will buy from you. If you're not sincere, nobody will work with you in a banking relationship. Because I think today's consumers are so sophisticated that they can see that right away. They know when they're being sold. So what I want to right here, I'll have probably about 25 minutes worth of slides. We'll talk about some things, but I want you to get prepared to just stand up and introduce yourself briefly, especially a couple topics. We do this all the time when we speak at Toastmasters, which is a club that meets weekly. But it really helps me sharpen myself, and Margie, you're doing that as an entrepreneur as well. And I'm glad to hear that a couple folks are entrepreneurs, people want to build their business and build their connections, because we'll also talk about what venture capitalists really are looking for. If you're looking for funding, I did a little research the last time I gave this talk, and I'll just give you the one point that we're going to make, is they don't buy a product, they buy the person first. They buy the entrepreneur. How do you come off? How do you create your own aura around you? So that's what we've got to be talking. And as we've go through it, many times when I've trained staff in the past, the courage to speak is what I saw as the #1 thing. I'm going to show you a slide later on. I think you might have seen it. Did you come to one of my earlier trainings last year or the year before? But the first thing I want you to know is, who am I? And the second thing I want you to know is, who is your audience? I just asked everybody for a quick cross-section. We have folks that work in e-tail marketing, a very well-known company, but you have very little direct contact with folks through presentations. Is that correct?
We pitch our services
Yeah.
sometimes to clients. Yeah.
In personal banking, you're trying to get people to be personally persuaded to put their money with you. And management, consulting, you know, that's a sensitive thing. Somebody has a business, they want to trust you to kind of put you in the rein, holding the reins. And in janitorial, I can't think of a bigger thing of trust, is that I want your crew in my business at night cleaning. That's the kind of thing you've got to build that trust, okay? So that's what we're going to talk about. Who's your audience? Our purpose is today when you're giving a presentation is simply quit thinking too much about the audience. You should know who they are, but I think there's a big issue of the first time you've ever given a speech, fear being in his mouth. Does it happen where you get a little scared? In fact, we're going to show a slide here quickly. The biggest, most important thing that I'm going to try to get through to you is choose somebody in the audience that you know or maybe met before the meeting and talk to them. You don't have to talk to everybody and try to think of everybody's opinions of you. The fact is we'll talk about confidence later too, but just simply make your mind kind of go into a single channel of communicating with one person. Okay, so we're going to talk about that as well. Now let's talk about the fear of public speaking. Chapman University down in Southern California does a survey every year, and this is the one I could get the stats for. The fear of public speaking, they do a survey of American fears, if you can imagine that. Started with terrorism. They were worried about what was it doing to really affect the American population. Needles, germs, abduction, gang violence, mugging, and public speaking. The only two things that freak out people more are dying and spiders. So I know what's going on in front of everybody, in your mind. You got to go in front of folks. The smaller the crowd, sometimes the tougher it is to speak to them. Have you ever been in a little conference room with two people and you need to get a little distance from them? Because physical language, the way that you speak with your body, is very critical. Because people have kind of animal distance. You all know that, right? Somebody kind of freaks out. If I came up to it at a party and I said, "How you doing?" It would like, "Oh." But you have to kind of judge that distance. And too far is not good either. If I talk over here, that's not putting out a good signal. So the important thing is to conquer your fear by addressing and connecting with people. So, bring up this one topic, is you can't outsource public speaking. As an entrepreneur, it's up to you to be the face of your business. Your business gets big enough in janitorial, you'll have a huge crew of marketing folks. They can do the marketing for you. But now they trust you as a business owner. So they have to trust what you're saying. And that's what we're thinking about here as well when we talk about venture capitalists. Okay, how do venture capitalists make a decision? How do people who invest in you make a decision? This was done by MIT, actually. They judge 95% of their decision is who's the team or the founder, the human being that's starting the business. The business model is pretty high, product and market, but the key is that venture capitalists look at who the person is. So you're going to have to package yourself a little bit. I've worked with Margie here, and I'm so happy that you're here as an example, because she's a very good business person starting a business, but she was a little scared the first time you did your presentation. But by practicing, she learned a few things. First thing I want to really step up to is a speaker is a leader. That means what you say is important because you're standing up in front of people. I really want to teach everyone here, when you communicate, it should be with certainty. It should be with authority. Not meanness, but authority. Because what you say in front of a crowd should guide their thoughts. You don't want to listen to a guy or a gal, let's say, "I think I know what I'm doing," or "I think I want to run for president." Nobody ever wants to listen to indecision. So if I were personally training every one of you, I'd say you get indecision out of your mind right now. Whatever course of action you think of, you can always be flexible and open. But if you are wanting to invest someone's money at GISA, for example, GISA, then you need to be certain that you're doing the right thing for them. And I can tell you, if you're not thinking in that mode, you're probably in the wrong business presentation, because then you're doing something false for folks. So, second, is a speaker embodies courage. Courage to speak up is the ultimate act of self-confidence. This is something, and how does self-confidence come, Margie, when you've been practicing?
It's much easier if you haven't practiced.
Yeah, if you haven't practiced. You also, if you speak to people, look at their eyes, look at their gestures, find what you connect with them, how you connect with them. Because you can see a nod here, and the most important thing about speaking is you look at everybody at least once. But you don't wander all over like this. You naturally look at somebody, you look at them for a minute, then you go on. If I did this all the time, what kind of radiation would it be from me? I mean, what would come off of me as a speaker? I'm disinterested and I'm just not connecting with you. Eye contact is the number one thing that we use to connect. So, speaker creates the idea in the mind of the audience. This is something a lot of people think, oh, nobody will like my idea. Well, hold on now. You're the one creating that idea for them. People are struggling to keep up with your idea, the idea of investing with your credit union. You need to think about, obviously, the old what's in it for them. But you need to think of everything briefly said about why you're an advantage. I mean, why should I do that with you? Why should I engage you as a business management consultant? So it's always good to tell a little bit about something about your background. What gives you that edge? Okay? What was your business that you're thinking about?
I was in the eye care industry to be a consultant
Okay.
for advertising marketing.
Okay, cool. So, now, here as you're going through it, you have to figure out a way. These are the quick points that I wanted to talk about. It's very hard to absorb these very quickly. They're simple, but to be liked, when you go into a setting, I see this a lot when we train our own staff. I have a staff of 42 people in the library. We have won some national awards recently at Spokane with no budget, but we do it all with people. And the fact is that I encourage every one of them to just be friendly with people. You're coming and talking to a client. You simply have got to say something nice to them and smile to them first. Even when you're preparing your talk, even with a VC or a venture capitalist or somebody who's going to be a big client, you just simply say, hey, I'm Paul and I'm glad to be here with you. These seem like very simple things, but I see a lot that folks don't do these. They plop down, they have some charts in front of them. Let me tell you how much money you're going to make. That's not creating relationship. Janitorial service, for example. You might say, well, I know we can save you $13 a month on your janitorial, whatever way you want to present it. You've got to say how it might have changed some businesses. Or is it residential or is it large building?
Yeah, commercial.
You've got to think of ideas and stories that will help you promote your business as well. So be liked, and the first thing is just to radiate good body image as well. Be memorable. It's always good to use stories. We'll talk about stories because I'm going to have each one of you give a quick story here in this room. But be memorable, meaning if you're just a guy talking about graphs and charts, you're droning on. No one wants to listen to that. You want to have a fun edge about you, something you did that was interesting. I often start off with, hey, when I was a kid, I was a street musician in Germany when I went to college there. Now, I'm not like that now, but that's pretty funny. They at least spark some interest in it. So we'll start around the room quickly. I want you to tell me something quirky about yourself that's kind of fun.
I golf, and people don't think anything.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, see, yeah, I'm a golfer, and there's always good to kind of use that contrast. What do you like to do that's kind of fun and quirky?
I used to be a 911 operator.
Now, there's 100 stories there, aren't there?
Quite a few.
So if business management, if you're dealing with crisis, I used to be a 911 operator. I've heard them all. There's a kind of a little lever to use some humor or to kind of open up. By being, this part of being memorable, it's just somebody to be easy to be around. Somebody that you feel relaxed and comfortable. What's something that's quirky about you?
Quirky? I don't know, I just like to be funny a lot.
Tell me one time that you were really funny to someone.
One time?
Yeah.
I don't really have any specific examples. I mean, I'm funny all the time. People just laugh around me all the time. I find funny things in each situation and just get the light and mood light.
Exactly. So you can say, I find a sense of humor even in janitorial services.
Yeah.
And they'll say, man, that guy thinks differently about stuff. And that takes you out of the general crowd and makes you memorable. What's something about you in eye care, for example?
well, let's see, I'm not sure about eye care, let's think of something else.
Anything, yeah.
So, I still play ice hockey at 64 years old, so.
That is
Still
really
standing up
interesting.
too.
You know, how do you keep from being injured or whatever? That keeps you competitive, it keeps you out there, and
Keeps
see,
your mind going.
and do you think I won't remember that the next time I see you? If you just say, I'm a guy with a portfolio, I want to show you some facts. No. They want to hear something about your background. Right there. What about you?
Me.
Yes.
I have 2 corgis.
Yeah. You have 2 corgis.
Yes.
Corgis are the royal dog of the British Empire. They're unbelievably cute. So you got something to say there. How about you?
3 years ago, I spent a year backpacking in New Zealand by myself.
Okay. Now, independent, tough-minded, self-reliant is what I hear in that. So it's a personal story, but it relates to also, this is really the best, when it connects to your business skills or what you want to accomplish. Okay? In the back there.
I have 10 tattoos currently.
Did 10 tattoos. And what's your most interesting tattoo?
The one on my arm, it says Pursuit of Happiness.
Okay.
Across both arms.
That means you really believe in the pursuit of happiness.
I've got a tattoo about that too.
Nice.
And so, everybody's got something different about you right there.
Before I started working at E-Tails, I taught middle school for a year.
Excellent. And you can say, tell you, I've dealt with lots of situations. Find something humorous but also useful in your present job. How does that connect with your present job?
Education keywords.
Yes, I know a lot about education, so I have some industry-specific knowledge that I've been able to apply to some of the products.
That's bingo. That makes me, that guy that works at E-Tails, he knows my educational market. That's much more than just your name and, hey, I want to provide you with services. Margie, what's something about you again?
I am a soup and salad type of gal, never into desserts, but decided a couple years ago I was going to learn how to decorate cakes because I couldn't. Took a class and now I'm making cakes for a wedding shower this weekend for my friends, but it's really given me an opportunity to use creativity and find something new and broaden.
So bingo. It talks about personal change, willingness to adapt and do new things. So you can tell a story about yourself. 911 operator is one of my favorite I've heard. Because you have seen everything, literally, or heard everything on the phone. Okay. Now, a lot of people fail to do this when you're talking. And we call it building a handrail. Remember we heard this? And I'm going to use it right away because it's something I've done all the time. It's the structure. Even when you stand up and talk to somebody on a 5-minute quick thing, is you just need to have maybe 3 points in your talk in your head. And a handrail is, if you announce it at the beginning, very briefly, I'm going to tell you about speaking. We're going to talk about the fear of speaking. We're going to talk about a few points on how to do it. Then people will use that handrail to understand and connect with you the whole talk. Now, it might seem, it doesn't have to be hugely planned, but you'll do this all the time. So when you're talking with somebody about janitorial services, you want to sell them a little bit. What would be 3 points you'd want to make? It's hard. Sometimes, the reason why I'm going to catch you guys on this is you have to do this in real time in your jobs all the time. So I'm interested in buying janitorial services.
I mean, the 3 points that I would speak on, a lot of other janitorial services don't clean microwaves for some reason.
Okay.
We clean our microwaves out and make sure they're ready for you to put your food into. And we pay attention to getting the grime and stuff off of sinks, where a lot of other companies don't do that. We pay close attention to dusting in the high areas of a lot of places.
Bingo. There's 3 points that you can actually say, we deal with the details. And here's the 3 details that we really look at. And they're probably secretly saying, man, if you could make my employee refrigerator area look good, I'm happy to have you. So you think about those things. But in a talk, you always have a structure. When I give a talk, I usually have a single piece of paper with 4 or 5 points on it. The words are not on there, but just points. And if you want to get a little bit more detailed, you might take a point and draw off a little couple, I call them spider trails, just little things that you don't want to forget. That's right. But the fact is you need to have a handrail. You have to have a structure for your talk. Do you guys do sales presentations all the time?
Well, individually, yes.
Yeah. So it's not a huge formal thing, but it's a good to practice with, hey, this is how I might open with someone. This is, once I learn about them, these are maybe the 3 points we'd like to cover, or 4 points. I find 3 points work very well because the fact that people do not remember any more than that. Let me give you 12 points on how to improve your life. Would you remember that stuff? No. 3 is really important there. Okay, power of story. Power of story comes from anything about you, like you guys just did, that's unique and interesting, that can be applied to your job. So at E-Tails, very fast-growing company, you need to say, when you're talking to somebody out, saying, we'd like to do business with you. Let me tell you a story about a company we just worked with. You probably have dozens of those stories.
Yep, case studies.
Case studies. In fact, a case study is a fancy word for a story in an academic setting. Business management, for example. The power of story. I was able to help a friend. If you're just starting out in this field, I was able to help a friend or help myself doing this with these couple techniques. And what I want to do is that. It's all within you. That's what I want to tell you. There's not something that you really need to learn from a book. You just need to bring out certain things about yourself. Margie she's running a business that will help people locate services for senior citizens and their family members that need help. But we coached her along the way. She did a couple presentations with really great courage. Then she started adding a story or two. It became really important for her to be able to talk that way. So, have you improved a business by janitorial skills?
Improve the business?
Yeah, has anybody said, man, it's a lot better here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Do not forget to mention that when you talk to a new client. You've got to tell your own story too. Okay. Now, I'm going to have everybody stand up. Put your notes down. You're going to stand up in a circle. And you're going to tell me a quick story. It has to be very short. Stand up along the wall if you have to for protection. But part of this is the courage to speak. Okay? And I'll start it off. I'm just going to simply tell a very short story. If it can be like 4 or 5 sentences, that's fine. I'll start it off. It's about someone who changed my life. I had a professor in college. At Whitman College, I went to school there. I was not worthy of going to that school academically until he had us write papers, and he put just a number on it. And all the people in the class voted on the best essay, and it happened to be mine. And it was disassociated from me, but I never forgot that my words had value to other people. So that professor changed my life. Tell me about something about you.
Well, since we're talking about papers, when I was in high school, I took an English, like a college prep English class that helped me skip the first full year of English. And I did a paper on the effects of Prozac, and actually made it kind of a fun paper, and then talked about the side effects and got 100% on it.
And you never forgot that?
No.
No. Cool. How about you over there?
When I first started in entrepreneurship, I was working a 9 to 5 doing basically side hustles, and didn't know what I was doing at all. And it wasn't until I hired a mentor, a coach, and he basically showed me about online business and marketing. And I took the skills that I learned there and then went and pitched a $9,000 contract on my lunch break from a 9 to 5 and was actually able to close it. So it was amazing.
That's a heck of a story.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. You.
Mine's kind of similar to yours, I guess. I had a professor in college. We had like weekly assignments where we had to respond to a question in a blog post. And I wasn't doing very well in school, and I wrote a blog post that was kind of off topic but related to something that I was interested in. And I ran into my professor on campus, and he he stopped me and he was like, hey, that blog post was really awesome. You should keep writing stuff like that.
And that lifted you
Like,
straight.
I didn't even realize that you guys cared. So, yeah.
Do you see the power of words communicating with someone else? That creates a memory that sticks with people forever. Seriously. How about you?
It's nothing professional or anything, but I would probably just say I have 3 older brothers. One in particular was my soccer coach growing up, and he just kind of definitely helped mold me to the person I am today. And he's, got a great job and a great family. He's a good dad, good brother. So changed my life, I wouldn't say so much, but he's helped mold it, I guess.
Exactly. Well, that's changing too. How about you?
Another college story.
Got a lot of them here.
It's
Yeah.
communications too. So I remember this professor I had, he was about that tall, always wore a bow tie. He was pretty funny at times in class, it was pretty interesting too. And so the biggest thing I remember out of it, we would write papers and and business papers, and you'd have to write it and always think of that other person. So you had to start with a sentence and not use the word I. And so you learn a lot about communication that way too.
Fantastic.
My wife also asked how well I did in the class. So I did okay. So
Stuck with
I
you.
think she kind of wonders.
It stuck with you. How about you?
Me?
Yeah.
Unlike most of you guys, instead of going to college, I ended up in prison. And met a gentleman there who really helped me realize that I wasn't thinking big enough. The numbers in my head were way too small. And today, I've been out of prison for a little bit over a year and a half, and my business has been going a year on June. I'm already over $27,000 a month revenue, which is way more than what I was thinking I'd be at this point. Just because of his ability to help me think bigger, it really changed my whole life.
That's a story.
Yeah.
And do you know how much everybody's pulling for you? Because it's a cool thing. That's personal change right there. And don't let that be an example to all of the people around you, because you're changing. And that's the hardest thing for any one of us to do, is to change our personal circumstance or kind of who we are, and you've done it. So that's really cool. How about Margie?
I've always been surrounded by really creative people. My friends are very creative people, but I never considered myself creative. I always thought I had these creative friends. And one of my girlfriends finally said to me, you are creative. I see a problem and I always find the positive, or I always try to find a solution to it. That's just, I thought that was a natural thing. And I've embraced it. And I'm making a career out of that. So same idea, it's thinking too small. You've got to think big, and if you have people around you, yeah.
It's very important to remember you can never do it by yourself. If you speak in a room alone, what happens? Nothing. That's why you've got to connect with people. Speaking is a communal thing, and it's first part of communication. So let's go. Okay, how about you?
Yeah. So another professor story. I had a professor who was pretty young and hip, and she was my nonfiction writing professor and taught me that my stories have value, and I ended up graduating with a degree in English. We're going on to work in copywriting, and have really used the power of words in my career because of that.
Tremendous. You can actually make living with an English major.
Yep.
How about you two? You.
So I was out of high school and I was working in a fast food restaurant as an assistant manager. And through hard work, a friend who also a coworker suggested to his father that he look at me to be employed within the credit union. And I never did go to college. And so through the many years that I've been there, this manager's always, supported me and pushed me into different parts of different fields in that credit union. And so just with hard work, I'm where I am today. So
It's fantastic. You went to the School of Hard Knocks about learning about life. And seriously, most of education is just noticing things. And you can do that no matter what your education is. So, right there.
So context, about 5 years ago, I'd been in a job for 8 years, wasn't super happy with it, had taken night classes to get my bachelor's degree. was going through a divorce, was in a really negative situation, and been married, with this guy for a long time. So didn't know myself, didn't know what I wanted, knew I wasn't happy. I had just gone to this thing with a friend of a friend, just like a lunch meeting. And so this friend of a friend had just gotten back from a working holiday in New Zealand. And I'd never met her, I didn't know her, she's from Spokane. And I was like, wow, that's really amazing. She'd just been back for like 3 months after this year abroad. And I'm like, I never considered doing that. That's really, really cool. And I just asked her a ton of questions. And she's like, well, why don't you do it? And I was finally in a position in my life after that divorce where I could afford to go on vacation for the first time, let alone like travel abroad. And I was like, well, okay, I'm not happy with my job. I don't have a house. I don't have kids. I'm not married anymore. Why not? Why not? So put a lot of my stuff in storage, sold my car, got rid of my apartment, and off I went a few months later. And it was just a conversation.
Everybody here has a great story. And the ability to learn and learn from context, when you talk to customers, one of the best ways to connect with them and communicate is ask them to tell a story too. Because that will create what between you two? A relationship. And that's almost unbreakable. The fact is that when you just bother to connect and communicate, I wanted to see if all of you had the confidence to stand up. It's very hard to get out of your chair, stand up and talk to total strangers. You guys aren't total strangers because you know each other pretty well. But the fact is that you guys all have it to speak. And the one thing I want you to work on, that if every time now that we know each other, is to speak clearly and loudly, okay? I heard some softer voices. There's soft voices when you're having a wine with a friend at the bar, you talk quiet. But when you're projecting your personality out, you have to speak clearly and distinctly. You have to fill that room with your personality. And that comes with voice. You can't do it like this, talking that way, because then people miss most of what you're saying. So I want you to, we'll call that out later on just to make sure you're speaking boldly. But I was amazed. Go ahead and take a seat, you guys. It's fantastic. Okay. Now, see, now everybody's past the nervous stage here. So how to practice? Practicing, this is a good thing. I would take these down because I did this for years. You would think it's ridiculous, the amount of preparation you have. The most important thing is to appear effortless and kind of rough around the edges when you speak to people. If I have a strict paradigm and I'm speaking from an outline like a newscaster, you won't believe me. But if I'm just having a conversation with you guys, that's when people believe you. So the practicing, you're going to laugh, but I did this for 35 years. We had to learn a speech. We had to write a speech about presenting to folks around the country. You remember all of those practices. And we had the August time for our sales staff. We had about 15, 16 sales staff. We had to appear in front of over about 200 people on staff. We had to give at least 5 major presentations to the assembled staff and see how they reacted to it. It got very boring for the staff. Audio. It's a good way when you have a talk, punch your phone on and listen and just tape yourself surreptitiously. Or audio, what do you call it now? Audio record. Listen to yourself in the car. If you find that you're not interesting yourself when you're by yourself with your audio recording, you need to change your vocal variety. Especially with pauses. I'm emphasizing pauses right now because pausing when you're talking to a larger group allows everybody time to think and absorb. It makes you sound very smart, actually. If you go to church or you've heard a great speaker, most pastors have mastered the art of pauses. They give a talk, they let that hang in the air, they stop for a second or two. Radio announcers do this as well. So you practice your pauses. Audio. Video is very good too. I find video very painful to watch about myself because then you realize, oh man, is this what people have to look at all day? But the fact is that you'll learn self-confidence. You're like, oh, I guess I'm okay. Every one of us, I mean, nobody's a perfect actor or actress, but video will show you some of the odd human traits that you might have when you speak. One that I have when I'm talking to a large crowd is called the bear walk. I'll walk over here and I'll talk to you, then I'll walk over there and talk to you. And if you speed up the tape, you just see somebody running back and forth like a squirrel. What you need to do is on video, you practice your movement. You try to have a triangle that you walk for a talk. Something that Margie's really mastered pretty well. And when you make a new point, you go over here, you take a couple steps, you stop and say, now I'm going to talk about the next thing. Because your movement is punctuation for your talk. And it gives you a verbal, a visual variety, folks. Work with a coach. That's really fantastic. You don't have to work with a fancy coach, just somebody to listen to you. A spouse, a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. But somebody that can just listen to you give a short talk, and they'll tell you what's BS and what isn't BS. Anybody done that already? It's kind of painful. But try that with a good friend. And then whiteboard your talk, as if I put you with a whiteboard in this room and you had to explain it to 3 people sitting there wanting to give you $1 million. What would you say to them? And they don't have any time, maybe 5 to 7 minutes. Let's talk about timing when you speak to people. What do you think the average length of a sound bite on television is? Television. 45 seconds. A commercial is 30 seconds. A half commercial is 15 seconds. The average sound bite on television and radio is 8 seconds. So you have to speak memorably in short phrases that can kind of be digested and found by people when you talk with them. So brevity, working with a coach works very well. And whiteboarding works very well too. Because if you can't explain it to yourself, you're not going to be doing a good job with others. Okay, so that's me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my work. I work at the Spokane Public Library. We, last year in July and August, we spoke with over 106,000 people about the bond, about asking people to give us money. And we had the highest bond passage of any library in the state of Washington. And we didn't do it with Facebook. We did it with personal chats with people. And I want you to plan these things. So we're going to go back to this handrail thing, and then I'm going to open it up to questions that you guys have as well. When you have a structure for your talk, everything has a structure. Sometimes you just make it up right there. You have a phone call with a client you're trying to convince about detail. Is it phone or email chatting with me?
It's phone. Yeah, I was going to ask you actually what advice you have for pitching over the phone.
Have talking points, but you don't have to read them. Nobody wants to listen to that person on the phone reading, but they're in front of you so you can conversationalize them. Stuff you don't want to miss.
So along those lines, something that we run into a lot that I would love feedback on is if you have to leave a voicemail for somebody, and if it's, because you can't leave very detailed stuff, especially about banking, but you do want them to call you back and you want it to be some information.
Yeah, but it's just enough. How do you like to be treated is the easiest way to find out how to speak. Give them something that, let them know that you have something for them to call you back about. Hey, Paul, I just found that we had some great returns on these 4 new investments that a lot of our clients are really enjoying. If you give me a call back, I'll have a chance to talk with you about it. Nobody likes invasive communication anymore. How many here have a landline at home? Yeah, I have one too that sets me apart. The fact is what do you hear on your landline every day?
I don't answer it. It's just there for emergencies.
So, the one thing that we did this all the time in my last 10 years of work, we do it even at the library. Nobody pays attention to just one form of communication anymore. It's called an email, or email then call. You're going to laugh, a very potent way is letter. Letter or handwritten card plus call. Because they will really remember that you did something different. If you just said, hey, find me on Facebook and give me a note, they get thousands of people doing that to them. But double up on that communication. When you're looking for clients, if they come up to you, let's say you've had a nice talk with a client, you had a coffee with them. follow up with them by email and also give them a quick jingle. It's also like dating. I'm going to use this. You're going to laugh at me too. But dating, you cannot be desperate. You don't sit down with somebody the first cup of coffee you have with them and say, I want to marry you right now. Would that work? Not in my world, ever. The fact is you just want to create a way that you're communicating. And the speaking is a very big part of that. So when you have a structure for your talk, let's talk about phone text. You write out 3 or 4 points. We used to write these for our staff, but we didn't want people to sound like they were reading them. Just things not to miss in your conversation. Okay? How many of you have done phone scripts? I know you guys probably have. Phone scripts are very useful because life is busy. You cannot really remember what you say all the time. Does anybody have this problem where, everything's a blur? So if you have it written down, hi, this is Paul, I just wanted to check in and be very casual and ask you to give me a call back, I can tell you some of these things. You've got to create a need in people when you talk to them. Okay? So let's go back to the power of story. You already did that. Working with a coach, whiteboarding your talk. We did this all the time in sales. In my world, the average sales, when I was working in the for sales profit world, each one of our staff sold $12 to $15 million worth of business every year. That was amazing that we did that, but we did it by asking people to trust us. We were a long-term company. That worked quite well. Let's get to other questions. Anybody else have another question? Totally open to other stuff. Yep.
I stutter a lot. So I just, how do I get past that? Or I guess it would be just more practice,
Yeah.
right?
It doesn't hurt to say, everyone, even when you meet somebody, it's not the first thing you say. But you say, every once in a while I might stutter. It's just me. And then people know about it. They're not curious about it. Oh, okay, that's just you. It's not a weakness. What I don't like to ever hear is falseness from people. Like, I'm trying to tell you I don't stutter, but I have a stutter anyway. If you just say, hey, every once in a while I might stumble on my words, I get a little excited, talk, but that's just me. That's the way I would handle it. And it calms down everybody. Most things are just questions that people have. So, any other questions that you have? Let me just bring up any scenario so I can help you.
You said to me, we're pulling for you, right, about the prison thing coming out and being successful. And then most of my clients, man, once I tell them that, they're like the same reaction that you have, right? However, I find it difficult to incorporate that because that is my story in the initial, like you said, to have a story and stuff. And
Yeah.
I feel like it's kind of a good part of my story because most people are like, wow, you're doing really good and that's a good change that you made in your life.
It's interesting. I want you to speak up right now. You have a good voice, beautiful voice. Speak louder. Okay,
You
say
want
it.
to repeat what I said? Or?
Yeah, exactly.
I can
Okay.
hear you, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I find that the story of going to prison and coming out being successful, a lot of people are really engaged with that. My clients are like, wow, that's really awesome that you're doing that. However, I find it difficult to broach that topic in the beginning. And I feel like that's part of my story, to be able to, just my life story. People want to hear that stuff. They get excited about that. Like, wow, you did this and now you're doing that.
Yeah.
And I just find it difficult in asking how I would go about doing that in the initial contact.
It wouldn't be the first thing I'd say to people. But I've not been in your shoes. I think it's part of your life. And the fact is it motivates you even more to do a great job. And that's something you just kind of have to feel it out with folks. Some people are more sensitive about that than others. I would tell that there's a lot of people in the U.S., at least I feel it myself, is that we need to give people a second chance. If you do your time, it's a tough time. I mean, I've never been in prison, so you know the real thing. The fact is that we need to give everybody a chance to be a full citizen. It's time that we think about all of us rather than just segregating people into groups and stuff like that. That's kind of, I think there are people really aching to be American citizens again rather than little labeled groups kind of things. So, yeah, did you hear how his voice sounded cool and smooth and neat when it was louder? You had some great support. You kind of went down in your tone too. Down in volume. Not in how you express yourself, but speak loudly and confidently because your voice, The sound of your voice is an indication of your character. Okay? Yes?
I'm working with speaking in front of people, but on the phone, that's new to me. Usually, I'm helping somebody who's asking for help, and now if I go and meet somebody one-on-one, I'm a little better. Bigger crowds I'm working on. But that phone, having to cold call, I mean, that's what I'm having to do to sell my business. To
Yeah.
tell people I have something that can help you. That seems like completely different. How do you get through that?
One thing we always did, I mean, we all have to make calls for sales, is simply don't treat, it's not fun, but you've got to treat it as something you enjoy to do. Like I'm glad to meet you on the phone. And it really does work. You guys know that work on the phone all the time. To smile and just make your face do that. Because they can hear it in your tone. If you're frowning, you will find that that'll come through in your tone. So the other thing is to put it in a part of a day where you have good energy. If you're leaving message with people, tell them, I'm going to follow up by email as well if that's easier. I always try to give people a couple ways of getting back to me. You guys work on the phone all the time, don't you? How are you chipper at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon?
Well, don't often make 4:30 p.m. Friday calls, but yeah, I don't know, kind of just like what you said with making it personable, making it conversational. That's kind of what helps me on the phone. I definitely am not the greatest, that's why I'm here. But yeah, just making it a conversation.
This is a big problem with folks, I would say under 40, because I'm older, I know that. The fact is that with your friends, you speak really fast.
I've
Because
been asked to slow down on the phone.
I've got a good friend of mine, I think you ever met him, Jack Vines from Alabama. His vocal style was to talk slowly because that's what they did in Alabama. He sounded really stupid in Spokane. I mean, somebody told him that. He said, I'm just as smart as anybody else. But the fact is that you need to match the environment you're working in with your voice. You're not having friends with your having drinks with your 23-year-old friends when you're in business. You might be quiet and calm at home, but when you're out there, I want you to project who you are to people with your voice. Because it's a good voice. And one of the bigger ways that you will find out if it's a good voice or not, let's turn that off. Are we done? There's some other, can we just turn that off because there's some, oh, there we go. Good. Now, because the tone of your voice is pretty much how you create friendships and relationships too. I'm not that polished of a person, but I try to be open-minded and kind of cheerful when I meet people, and usually they radiate that back to you. If you're not feeling happy or fun about your job, it's probably not the best thing to be going out and doing sales calls. So, yes?
What I've had an issue with on the phone is like pausing and letting them speak, and it kind of goes back and forth. How would you recommend dealing with that?
Let them pause. Say
Yeah.
something that might require a response. So what do you think? And that's a classic old sales thing. The first person who speaks kind of loses, quote, because when you give gaps in your talk, give some pauses, they really are very fruitful. Did you notice I have a big, strong pause after fruitful? Because I wanted to hammer that home with you guys. If I talk really fast, I want you to be really fruitful on the phone and be really effective with people. That you lose the effect of all of those words. So every word has to come out in a way it's a little slower than normal speech because you're trying to be understood by a stranger. If I'm talking to a crowd, I once talked to a crowd at Ohio State University, a bunch of parents and students. It was almost 1,000 people. And you're standing on stage, you have to give a gap after every line so 1,000 people can hear your words and react to them. At church, they have to do this too. So, smaller crowd, it's easier to get feedback and stuff like that. But listen to your voice.
So something that I struggle with, and I'm not sure what you might recommend, is especially over the phone, is stating something and then feeling the need to continue clarifying that. And so rather than pausing, but I'm not always confident that what I say initially is understood and I'll get the response I'm
Yeah, very common, remember I talked about not overthinking everything? Your own minds, you guys are smart people. You're thinking way ahead. Folks on the other end are just trying to absorb what you say. So give them some time to hear what you have to say. And pause will work really well. One of the better ways is if you ever could tape yourself. I used to tape myself doing meetings, like in the audience, in the office with staff, and I'd say, I'm going to tape myself, not to listen to you guys, but hear myself. Sometimes I was shocked at my speech speed. How can anybody understand that? So, in a sales situation, you can't talk too much either, because you'll just drive people away. They don't want to hear that anymore. And I'm not being mean about it, just say something of value that relates to your product or service, and then just stop for a minute. Do you think that's a good idea? Or does that sound like something that would help your business if we detailed your sinks like that? And literally, they will think that, yep.
Off the phone, not in front of people, but when you're networking to start a business, that's one of the things that you have to do all the time. You have to go into a crowded room, hello. That is, how do you do that? I mean, I'm not afraid to do that, but I don't think I do it as well as I should.
Yeah, and the art of that is, that is a little bit like a stump speech in politics. Well, you know, I've started this business and we connect families with resources to make the best choices for senior care. You know, you're going to have to find a 1 or 2 line description. I've always wondered what e-tails does, because I know people that work there.
The elevator pitch,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And it's not plastic, it's just simply, what would you say to somebody if you had 10 seconds to describe your credit union? No.
I can.
But actually, you should practice, and that's something you can practice with a friend all the time. You know, you own a janitorial service. You'd say I would look it up, there's 57 janitorial services in Spokane, but ours is the one that does this. They won't remember the rest of them. They'll remember you because you told them something. Set it apart. Okay, so don't talk too long. Basically learn the art of the, well, yeah, I'm glad you asked. I work at the library, and the Spokane Public Library in the north side, we are the busiest library in eastern Washington. My team sees about 30,000 people a month. So you can see that we see most of Spokane. People immediately are interested. What's happening there? Why is it so? Everybody thinks the library is dead, because this is my product that I offer. The fact is, it's the single most connecting organization with the rest of the population in the entire city. And it's funny, it's not just books. It is a lot of other stuff. And I usually walk away at that point and they say, well, what do you mean, what's the other stuff? So there's always something about, like when you're talking to folks about you want to start some management consulting, I would always be ready. Well, I specialize, or I'm interested in these 3 problems for small businesses. Not 7, not 12. Couple that you can feel comfortable with. Any other questions? I'll be here as long as you have questions. I'm going to go back and meet with architects working on $77 million worth of libraries